Last Sunday night, in light of the racism that exists in our country, I called two friends, Daquan and Arlen, to see how they were doing. Daquan and his wife Erica are small group leaders in our community of faith. I performed their wedding. I played ball with Daquan in college. I love Daquan and his family. I met Arlen and his wife Letitia through our Next Gen basketball ministry. I had the honor of walking through the passing of their teenage daughter Yanni, and God bonded us through that experience. I love Arlen and his family. And as a predominantly white church, I want us to do one thing: listen to these men as they share what it is like to be black in this country in this time. So, Daquan, have you ever experienced racism from law enforcement?
Yes.
And could you just share an experience that you've had?
Yeah. Had multiple experiences. I guess the one that kind of stands out for me, probably about 6 years ago, or not 7 years ago. I had just got a new car. And I'm driving to Chicago on I-80, driving. Got not my regular plates, still my new car plates on the car. State trooper drives up beside me, looks into the car. I look over at him, drops back behind me, and I know I'm not speeding because I'm cruise controlled. Drops back behind me, hits the lights. So I pull over, comes over to the car, I say, "Hey, can I get your license, registration, everything?" Like, "Yeah, here you go." Just had the license, didn't have my registration at that second. He asked, I said, "Why'd you pull me over?" Because I know I'm not speeding. And he says, "Is this your car?" I'm like, "Excuse me?" He said, "Is this your car?" I'm like, "Yes, this is my car." He said, "How long have you had it?" I said, I don't know, about a week or so now. He said, "Can you prove to me that this is your car?" And I said, "Why did you pull me over? Can you prove to me that this is your car?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "But I have the actual registration thing is in the trunk. Can I get out of the car and go check the trunk?" And she was like, "Yeah, get out, move slowly and everything." So I get out the car, takes me to the back, I pop the trunk, and he's still just, "Where'd you get this car from? How did you get this car? What do you do for a living?" Just going on, and I'm like, so I'm going through, I'm trying to get my registration. I get the registration, I'll give it to him. And he's still, just kind of berating me about the car, like, how would I ever have this car? And then he said, "Do you have any proof? Can you prove to me that this is your car?" And I was like, "Dude, I just handed you the registration." So he wasn't even looking at it, So then finally he looks at it, and then he's like, "Well, oh, okay, well," and I'm like, "Hey, can you tell me why you pulled me over?" And he's like, "Have a nice day, drive safe." And I'm like, "Seriously, dude?" And I'm in the middle of, oh, before that, forgot about that. While we're standing there, when he's asking me about the car, he's asking me, "Do I have weapons in my car? Do you have any drugs in your car?" And all of this stuff while I'm going through trying to get the registration. So, and yeah, so that's how that one went.
So how did that make you feel?
It makes you feel angry, I guess, for me, because I know, I guess, at this point in time in my life, I know I can't raise my voice because they'll, use that against you, and it's frustrating, I guess, because it's not the only time it's happened. It's like, okay, this is still going on, and then, I don't know, just yeah, it's just frustrating.
Can you tell us about Black Lives Matter? What that is?
What that means? Black Lives Matter basically is that if you tear everything out and just listen to what it's saying, is that Black Lives Matter. A lot of people get the wrong idea and think what they're saying that Black Lives Matter and no other lives matter. No, we're saying that Black Lives Matter too, where they should. We know that all lives matter, but we want to let people know that apparently the judicial system don't realize that Black Lives Matter because, we're getting killed, there's no convictions, things of that nature. So I guess we're constantly trying to get that around to people. And we a lot of times we'll get that answer when we say, "Hey, Black Lives Matter." Somebody yells out, "Well, all lives matter." Well, we realize that. And just to kind of give you a thought process about how that sounds to us, I guess the worst case scenario, if you would have someone die in your family, a loved one, a child, a mother, somebody like that, and you're at the funeral and you're doing like the eulogy, and you're talking about how special that person is to you, and you're because you've got this loss, and somebody gets up and yells out and say, well, all kids are special, and it's like, seriously, it's like basically saying that yours isn't that special. And that's how it feels. If we're saying Black Lives Matter, you say, well, all lives matter. So basically you're saying that my life isn't that special. And that's kind of, how disheartening that is to hear somebody say that, even the blue lives. Well, that's not a life, it's not a life. I can say it's a life, but it's not a person. If you say blue lives, I can go home and get out of my uniform and nobody knows who I am. I can't take off this uniform. So that's a constant thing. So again, slap in the face. It's like you're not listening to what we're saying. If you just listen, we're basically just saying, yes, Black lives, we know all lives matter. Right now, we're working on trying to get everybody to realize about the Black lives because we're the ones getting killed, so.
So what's the answer to fix this?
Well, I don't think it's any clean-cut thing, but I know it's going to start. It starts with the police. I don't know, it's going to be in the training of the police. It's also going to be gone, we always say, well, hey, all cops aren't bad. Okay, we realize that. But we need those good cops to stand in when they see the bad cops doing bad. So that's a big one. Because if you're standing around there and you're not doing anything, you're part of the problem also. And we, as a Black culture, have been speaking about this for the longest, and nobody's listening. And so it's going to take people of the other race. It's going to take white people to step in, and when you see something going wrong, you're going to have to voice, in a legal situation, to demand convictions and things of that nature, because, whether you want to believe it or not, the system is not set up to listen to us. And so, but when people of other cultures step in and start fighting for us, it has a bigger impact than just Black people standing up and saying it.
What do you wish white people would know or understand?
Whenever, especially during this time, I guess, we have a lot of people who are stepping in and saying, well, what can I do to help? The big thing is going to start with dismantling, I guess is a good word for it. Heard somebody say that the other night. Dismantling the fairy tale view that everybody's just, created equal and everybody has the right chances to, succeed and, and equal and so on and so forth. You have to dismantle that. I know that's what's taught and everything, but for us, that's not it. So when you come into our conversation with us and you're thinking that, you're going to miss the whole conversation. So get rid of that view, come in with open, and don't come in with your thought process. If you want to ask me about what's going on, ask me what's going on, not thinking about what your experience is with them. So if you ask me, well, what is my experience with the police? Don't say, well, that could never happen because that's never happened to me. Now, we're not talking about you. This is my view. So you have to rip all of that off, remove that view, and then come in and listen to what it is that we're trying to say. I guess this has been an ongoing thing, And over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, it's been coming up more, especially with the kneeling and with the NFL, and that was to draw attention to what's going on. And it was just brushed under the table. Oh, well, no, that's not what it is. And they switched the focus and made it into something else. It's anti-military, it's anti-American, although they were telling you, no, we are kneeling because of police brutality. Has nothing to do with that, but no one listened. And so with anyone, if you don't listen, it just builds and builds and builds. And like I tell someone, if a person is not getting heard, they eventually explode. So you have to listen and come in with open ear, about what it is that's actually going on. Because if you don't listen, this is kind of what we end up with now, and people rioting and things of that nature. And, and the looting and all of that is not, we can't say that all that's valid, but it's coming, a lot of it's coming from anger and people just exploding. So.
Well, how are you and your family doing? I know you got kids and
right.
wife and...
A lot of conversation. Every day it's something new, talking points. Trying to explain stuff, to people. Watching the videos and trying to explain to the kids. They're like, well, how did they not get arrested for that? And so that's kind of what it's been these last couple of weeks. A lot of talking points with them and reiterating things. I have a 17-year-old son, so I've had the conversation with him about how to keep your hands here if you're ever pulled over. Don't reach for anything, don't reach for a wallet. So just reiterating that with him. He hasn't been out a whole lot now. He goes to work, comes back, but hey, it doesn't take that much, You could be around the corner from the house, So it's just been a lot of education, I guess, with us, especially for the younger ones, trying to explain stuff that's going on. So, and like I said, it's frustrating. It's just, we're sitting in there now, and we can say we'll read over stuff, and it's like, hey. So and so they got arrested, but then now in our minds we're going, okay, now we're waiting for the acquittal. So, and that's just because of the experience. So we're just sitting down, just like basically just being prepared for that, and it's kind of how we are.
So Arlen, have you ever experienced racism from law enforcement?
Unfortunately, yes.
Could you share just an experience you've had?
Yeah, so it would have been about 3, maybe 4 years ago, and I have 2 friends of mine that actually they have it's like an upward bound type program, community program where they hold overnighters for youth, and they had it at the Pill Coleman Center over on the southeast side of Canton, and they contacted me and said, hey, would you mind being a chaperone for us? And this is the age group between the ages of 12 all the way to 18 years old, high school age kids, and this was an effort to keep kids off the street, give them something to do, talk to them, and try to be a positive impact on them. So I said, great, I'll do it. So I got off work about 5 o'clock that Friday, went out about 7 o'clock and spent from 7 o'clock to about 11:45, 11:50ish before I left to go home. So I told them I have my family at home. I have to get home at some point. So long story short, when I was driving home, and I'm driving home Cherry Avenue, basically southeast into the northeast side of Canton, turned on 12th Street northeast and started heading west. Well, an officer, switch lanes, got behind me, turned with me. Light had changed color. He turned with me, turned his lights on, then he turned them off. So this officer followed me up into the corner of 12th and Market Street. And at 12th and Market, I'm turning right because I need to take Market North to get to my home because I'm on northwest side of Canton. And as soon as I went to turn, he lit me up. He lit me up. So in my experience of, the work that I do, first thing I did was, all windows in my SUV, I rolled them down. And, I had all the windows down, and I'm sitting there waiting for the officer to come, had my hands on the actual steering wheel, so there's no issues. It's almost 12 o'clock at night. I want to make sure everything goes right. Well, this officer has every light on his vehicle. I mean, he has his sirens, of course. He has his spotlights on as well. And so he gets out, and he's a distance from my car, and he's pretty much yelling commands. I mean, he didn't walk up to my car. He's yelling commands, and he has his hands positioned in a fashion that we call tactical. By me recognizing that position, I'm thinking, does he have his firearm out? And he, from a distance, started yelling, put your hands out the window, hands out the window. I put my hands out the window, started asking who was all in my vehicle. And sir, the windows are down, nobody but myself. So he, from a distance, walks around my vehicle, and he's shining his light in and looking. At that time, I did notice he didn't have his firearm, but however, he had his hand on his holster, in what we call a position of being ready. And so he walks around my vehicle. And then once he sees that there's nobody in there but myself and my hands are in position, he comes up to the vehicle. And, he's just yelling, where are you coming from? And just going on and on. And so he finally gets to ask me for my license and registration. And so as I'm getting my license and registration, he happens to see a business card of mine. And he says, you're on probation. Who are you on probation with? Who are you on probation with? And I went to tell him I'm the probation officer, and he cut me off. I mean, he rudely cut me off, and if he could have said shut up, it probably would have been shut up, but he cut me off, and I just was quiet. And I gave him the license and registration. Now, I'm not on probation, and he took the license and registration, and he went back to his vehicle. So I'm sitting there the whole time, and to be honest, at that point, I'm a little nervous because I'm thinking, I didn't do anything. I'm just driving home. I wasn't speeding. All lights on my vehicle worked. I had my turn signal on. I'm sitting at this light and headed home. And the guy comes back. So as he's coming back to the vehicle, I'm thinking, what's going to happen next? Didn't have his flashlight this time. And he's walking up to the vehicle, and he says, Mr. Color. And I was surprised because now I'm Mr. Color. And he starts talking with me, etc. And he says, so you're the probation officer? And I said, yes, I am the probation officer. And he says, you know why I stopped you, right? And I said, no, why'd you stop me? He said, well, you have one of your license plate bulbs is out. And I'm thinking, a license plate bulb is out. You got two. And my plates are well lit. Don't have any tinted covers on my plates. And that's why you stopped me, and you put this scene on at this gas station in front of people, and even yelled at me as if I was a child. And I'm a criminal justice professional myself, and yelled at me as if I'm a child. And in a sense had me in a moment that I'm not knowing what to expect. And so he goes on to, give me my license, give me my registration. He says, well, Mr. Color, thank you for what you do in our community, and you be safe now. And I couldn't do anything but shake my head and out of the kindness of my heart and, the type of person I am, I said, well, thank you, and you be safe too. But when I pulled off, I was angry. When I pulled off, I was angry. Even talking about it now, it sends a certain feeling, through me, because I'm thinking we do the same work in the same community. We know the people we target because of our intel that we receive. But however, on that night, I was targeted as a profiled individual. And to get the reason of being pulled over of just having a license plate bulb, 1 out of 2, be the reason I was pulled over, and then to go through everything and him to see my card and to yell and scream and everything else and not allow me opportunity to tell him that it's my business card, I'm not on probation, and then for him to come back and explain and say Mr. Color, etc. I'm thinking, wow, why couldn't the greeting had been Mr. Color? And I shared this with my wife when I got home. I shared the experience, and I told her that it opened my eyes to see how things really can transpire. Because had I been on the other side, and I decided to take off and run, or whatever have you, it would have been a bad situation. But luckily I wasn't doing anything wrong. Luckily I was on my way home, and being the type of person I am, gave him the opportunity to say whatever he's going to say, and was patient with him, and then respond in the fashion that I did, that it was able to save me. But I took that opportunity to hold on to, because like I mentioned, I was coming from an activity with individuals that were teaching them how to be positive. And I use that to share with my children and even with other youth or teens, any other individual that I come across, just to, tell people how to be appropriate, do's and don'ts, I'll say, if you get pulled over, because by what you do, sometimes it can cause a reaction to not be how, or I wouldn't say reaction, but cause the outcome to not be how that one ended up.
So as a law enforcement officer and seeing what's happening in our nation today, from that side of it, from the perspective of a law enforcement officer, what are your thoughts, as you've watched things kind of transpire in the last couple weeks?
You have good people and you have bad people. I guess everybody enters the field of criminal justice, for their own reasons. Everybody's path in the criminal justice field is different. Everybody's experience is different. My personal view may not be the same as the next person's personal view, but I can tell you, I've been fortunate, here locally to work with a lot of good people, Have I had the opportunity to be in the presence of some not so good people? Yes, I have. But the reality is when I look at everything that's been happening nationwide, and I actually had shared this with my wife the other day, you have officers who do their job and they take their job serious, and it's a service. And they take that job to say a service before self. And they're going to put everything out there and they're going to do everything that they're trained to do and do things right because they want to serve the people and they want to have that trust component be present and be true. But you also have others who bring whatever problems they have outside of work with them. Whatever morals, values, beliefs that they have, they don't set those aside and stay transparent. They bring those with them. And when that crosses and they can't separate it and have that balance, you end up with bad situations, and you also end up with cliques. And when I say cliques, because you'll end up with cliques of, individuals who, may stay together and preach the same thing and practice the same thing, and it creates somewhat of a division. And I say that because you'll see at times in law enforcement, and I'm not just speaking here locally, sometimes you may have division. One thing I do with the agency I work for is I preach to our agency staff. We have to practice self first. Who am I? What is my character like? What is my integrity like, etc.? And we work on that first, and then when we work on that, we bring that to the agency because we all represent that agency, and we need to represent the one thing, not different things, and putting all of our different personalities in one pot, and then we have chaos. So as a law enforcement officer, my heart goes out to those guys who are doing the right thing, and those guys that stand for the right thing, because it's unfortunate that when I share what I share with my wife is that you're watching officers get hit with rocks, bottles, things of that nature, and I'm thinking this is somebody's dad, somebody's husband, somebody's brother, somebody's son, and for some of them to not respond is maybe out of the kindness of their heart, but they're taking the blow because of those that don't want to do right, and it's just not fair. So
what's the answer to fix this?
Well, good question. Very good question. What is the answer to fix this? And to be honest, there's many answers. What I would say is, and this just comes from viewing things in a leadership view. It has to start locally first. Things have to start locally. Locally, communities, have to come together. Communities have to be on the same page. Communities have to address their issues when those issues arise and not sweep them under the rug or put them to the side. Communities have to be willing to speak, have to be willing to sit down, have to be willing to be transparent. There's a lot of things that the community has to do, and it has to start with the community leaders. And those community leaders making sure that they're what's called boots on the ground. Not just somebody, wanting to put their face in the media to say, here's what I'm doing, but then once the media is gone, you're doing nothing. It needs to be real, and it needs to be real from that point. And at the same time, you actually have to be the example. You have to model it. There's examples in our media recently of, some of our community leaders and some of them law enforcement that they're modeling what it should be like. And it's an opportunity for people to see it, and it actually has caused some of the tension to be de-escalated so that people can see this is not just what they're saying, this is what they're doing. And they're out there at hours when they can be at home with their families and they could be doing whatever else, but they're coming back to the community where the tensions are, and they're sitting with you and having conversations with you, even praying with you to have everybody understand we need to fix this and we need to fix it now here. So that my answer would be is that it needs to happen locally first, and we can't leave God out. I'm going to be blunt. We can't leave God out. When I think of Ephesians and God's armor, and I think about, before it gets into telling us how to prepare with God's armor, it tells us what we're dealing with. Our battle is not against flesh and blood. When we look at it, we may be different colors, but the reality is we pump the same blood, we breathe the same air, and we all come from the same creator. And the reality is if we can focus on that to understand that our differences are minimal compared to the common things that we have that we share, which is greater. And if we can understand that, then I think that can be a start for people to understand that our differences are very minimal and we're making them bigger than what they really should be.
What do you wish white people would know or understand?
I would say the first thing is, and when we say no, is to listen. And when I say listen, is because it's easy for us to see something and we see the action and don't hear the voice, but we just see it as an action and say, wow, look at what they're doing. Well, that action is really a voice. And so in one of my communication classes, it was mentioned before that, about 70 or 80% of what we say is not what we say with our lips, it's what we do. And so I would encourage to just pay attention and pay attention to some of the struggles of, the African-American population, the black community. And I wouldn't just even say black community, but, the black and brown community. Take time to just pay attention because there's a lot of things that, we can sit and we can explain forever. And, our history even shows us these things and tells us these things. But it's things that we experience in our everyday that build. And when it builds, those are things that you hold on to and you can't forget about because it's how you've been treated or not treated. It's something that somebody said that you need to watch out for. And then now you're walking around with a conscience to say, I hope that doesn't happen to me. And that conscience now, in a sense becomes a shell. And now you're in a shell and you're thinking, I have to stay in my shell because I got to stay protected. And I would say just pay attention because a lot of what you see is not just people acting out. It's just the inside, and I believe they have said it a lot, in the media, that it's an inward cry. People are crying out from things that they've bottled up. And not to say that the looters and things, that's different. And that's more violence and criminal. But when you look at the protesters and you look at what they're doing, just watch. And when you have the opportunity to listen as well.
So last question, just how are you doing? How's your family doing with all of this?
Me and my wife have told our children, this is history. We've told them that every moment they need to pay attention to what's going on. They need to look at things, seriously. We have a 16-year-old daughter. My son's 11, and then my youngest boy is 8, be 9 here next month. And they're young, but they can understand. And so we take time to correlate what they see going on now to some of what they've been taught so far as history. And we also teach them to, not be shameful or not take pride in who you are because of the stuff that you see against our people, but however, you have to look at these situations and look at how your character needs to be appropriate and what you need to stand for. I say that because my 16-year-old daughter, as most 16-year-olds, she wants to be part of everything. And she doesn't understand why she can't go out and protest in certain settings. And so my first question to her is, you want to go protest? What are you protesting for? If you can identify what you're going to protest for, then maybe I can give you permission to go. But if you can't identify and you just want to go because you want to be part of the crowd, then you're no different than that person that ran into Macy's and stole those pair of tennis shoes and came out and they wanted to be in the spotlight because they wanted to be part of what was going on. And I told her, when you can identify why and what you're going to understand out of what you just did, then we can allow you to go protest. And I think the big thing is them understanding that these are moments you're going to have to hold on for life and understand these things, because what we're talking about right now, unfortunately, it's not going away. Part of the problem is power and powerless. And we have a very long journey, I'll say, before racism is anywhere near we would like to see it here in our nation. And I say that because there's a lot of pieces that need to be put together. And here, I would say, in our community, we don't see a lot of what other communities see. I'll mention this, I don't want to be too long. I stayed in the South for 2 years, and it was very different. And my experience in the South was an eye-opener for me to understand, be fortunate you came from up north and you live up north. And my heart actually went out to those individuals and even some of my buddies I played ball with, because I would never understand what their life was like. But by just hearing about it, allowed me to understand that, man, this problem is a lot more deeper than what I've been presented in my entire life. And they lived it, and we're still living it at that time.